There has been a bit of work done in that space around operational aspects as well. So just wanted to point those out from a budget point of view. That has had a little bit of an impact also on our net funding results requirements, and the fact that we're over in that space. The biggest part of that being consents and compliance, which we'd already spoken to Council around, which was from the reduction in revenue for compliance programs primarily, but also for consents. At the moment, we're recommending that the carry forwards are taken forward as they're deemed, but we will have a conversation around what that means both for this year and next year. But happy to take any questions to start with.
Any questions out there on the report? Councillor Williams?
Thank you. I've got about 17.
Yeah.
So what I thought, that's probably not going to be helpful, but honestly I could probably spend a day with you on this. So what I thought I'd do, and I have read it like 3 times, so I'm just trying to, by osmosis, get to grips with this place a little bit more. Can you explain to me, please, the relationship between paragraphs 3, 4 and 12, in the sense that we have an operating surplus of 44 million, but 43.5 million below budget. So were we expecting an operating surplus of near 90 million?
Correct.
Okay.
So we were in.
Right.
So
okay.
the primary result from that was the revenue for the one-off dividend from the port was included as part of our operating revenue. And that one-off dividend, which was expected to be come through primarily all the way from the port through to HBRIC through to HBRC.
Stuck to that.
Some of it's stuck at HBRC, okay. And we've tried to highlight that as much as we can, but it is sort of buried in the numbers a little bit.
So is that money, that total of 90, some of which is stuck in HBRIC, essentially our managed fund?
Correct.
Okay, now if you strip that out, you get down to $0.6 million surplus. How does that stack up against a net funding requirement deficit of 0.8 million, or are they just completely unrelated concepts?
They are related in the fact that some of the net funding amount that we get actually goes towards capital. So the revenue and rates that come in, there's an expectation of some of that actually flowing through to pay for our capital, which is why we would normally budget with a surplus. When some of that money doesn't come through, that's where you get that shortfall in net funding requirements between the two. Okay,
so that leads to my third question. Is the real thing that we should be focusing on this thing that's called a net funding requirement, which blends operating and capital? Is that the big news, the $0.8 million net funding deficit? Is that what we should be most interested in, do you think? Or?
So it's... There's a little bit of a step process in that. So the net funding requirement is around what we said we would fund and what we're short in that space. And so the 0.8 deficit that we're in that space is around actually the general rate funding that we were expecting, some of which is for capital and some of which is for operational. The flow on from that then is also, that then backs up with the fact that some of that investment income that would have been part of our net funding requirement wasn't there either, which is why you go from the 0.6 to the $7 million deficit.
Right. Would a simple way to describe it be that where our net funding requirement is in the negative, in this case $800,000, we effectively go backwards rather than forwards in terms of our overall balance sheet position.
Oh,
so
okay.
Accumulate it, so it's
all
the income, including borrowing. So so in this case, because we weren't planning to borrow, our reserves are shrinking by that amount this year. Okay. When we normally wouldn't want to shrink at all. We'd want to ensure that all of our revenue covers all of our costs, including our borrowing, and we're in a net stable position or surplus.
Thank you. Now, can I have 2 more questions?
Sorry, Martin.
Hopefully they're being helpful, but the ICM had a...
What number are you on?
Paragraph 29.
Thank you, it's helpful to see that.
had a $3.9 million overspend on capital expenditure. What was the overspend on by the OCM? Do we know? Maybe an unfair question for those present.
Well, there were, one item is that within the, again, it's one of the ways this, the system things have been run, is that the Clean Heat Sustainable Homes programme is classified as a capital programme for some of the work in here, and that's been very successful, and we've had about $2.5 million more in take-up of that than we expected, so that's where a lot of that's gone from.
Thank you.
So it's a good overspend.
And it doesn't actually sit in integrated catchment management anymore, but when we built the last long-term plan, it did. So it now sits in corporate services, but we have to stick with the accounts as they were constructed for the LTP.
Now, thank you. Now, I'll shut up after this last question. I read all of the carry forwards and didn't understand any of them because the numbers didn't seem to, the recommendations of what we carry forward didn't seem to ever match, or seldom match, the overall, the underspend. There's some sort of recommendation to carry forward things that are different. Yeah, I could probably give an example of that.
Paragraph?
Well, let's try 51, shall we? We had governance sector 70,000 carry forward in relation to iwi engagement, and we had an underspend of 152. So these numbers, are you sort of saying of our underspend, you're picking an amount of that to go forward on some basis, or other?
Yeah, on the basis that we've got inordinate expected costs in the coming year, or in the present year now, that are over and above the budget that we think we need to, but we don't want to carry all of it forward because we're trying to minimise how much carry forward we do, because every bit of carry forward contributes to the deficit for the 1920 year.
0.8 million.
So yeah, we've already been through this with a fine tooth comb.
So they're all judgment calls.
They're
to try
judgment
and
calls.
get the line between this year and next year. About
Correct.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
There might have been genuine underspends in some areas as well, and we've specifically, there might be specific things that weren't completed within that year, so therefore we want to carry the budget forward. So it's not necessarily the full over or under, it might just be for a specific item.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. So the impact of the 5, executive summary point 5, the impact of financial market of our returns, we're 7 million short because of the pandemic. That must be an estimate, of course, because you can't.
There's an estimate at the moment.
That's an estimate. It should.
No, that's correct. Sorry, this is actually not an estimate.
Yep.
So that's based on well, it's not just cash, it's a recognition of the income and the capitalised gains that we've got on our investments compared to what we had budgeted to come through into the organisation.
Mostly comprised of not getting an interim dividend.
Yeah, no, well, it doesn't say anything about capital, because the other thing I was going to ask is that's dividend. So you've got the unrealised valuation for Wellington and Napier investment properties with 11.5. I thought that was quite incredible, really. Incredible growth in property. But so what's our unrealised Well, first of all, I'm interested that that is actual, because we only had COVID for a short period of that time.
Yeah, the value of our investment funds dipped, so we actually lost some of our capital base particularly during March and April, so we were down about 9%, and it's actually recovered a little bit to be the value of the investment.
So that's the reason. It's a timing issue.
Was at the time of investment, so we actually.
So there's a timing issue. So you didn't have any unrealised revaluation at that point in time.
So there's a slight difference in the way that we actually account for the properties that we have and the valuation of those, which is purely a book exercise to an extent, versus the managed funds. And the way that that's accounted for in revenue is slightly different. So the revaluation that we do for the properties goes through sort of below our operating line. And so we don't sort of book that as revenue it is, but at a comprehensive income level, which is slightly different than what we do for the investment funds.
Yeah, because you said unrealised value revaluation gains towards the operating surplus. That's capital gains into operating surplus, but maybe I just don't understand the accounting there.
There are different accounting treatments. So investment property, where you revalue that goes into your operating surplus. Revaluations of things like property, plant and equipment and your land and buildings and your unrealised gains on your investments and so on, they go through below the line, so they're not part of your operating surplus, they're part of your comprehensive income. So there's a different accounting treatment for
Okay, because it's not taxable, that 11.5 million, is it?
No.
No.
So the unrealised, I'm really interested in this, I've been nagging on for a while. So right now, what's our unrealised capital growth in our 160 mil invested?
Right at the second, I can't tell you that.
No, but within roundabout, I mean, what last week?
Because sorry, I can't tell you that exact figure at the moment.
Approximate figure.
Could we get that figure from our
Yes,
investment
absolutely.
bankers?
Will we
The
give an
capital
approximate
growth is
figure?
included.
$5, $100?
Capital growth on the managed fund is included in these year-end numbers. So
Just not listed in any of these, yes.
so the 1 million that we made
Yeah.
on the managed fund will be a total of dividends plus capital gain. So actually the capital gain might have the capital value of the stock might have actually gone down because we actually didn't make any substantial capital gains on that managed
At
fund
that point
in
in
that
time.
12-month period. Yeah. So
Sorry, we
Right
do.
now,
we
whenever
do
they're
have
going
those.
berserk.
We do have those. I do have those figures. I just don't know them
Can
off
you
the
just
top of
email?
my
I'm
head.
just really interested.
Yep, absolutely.
Thanks.
So if we look at, we just got our results actually through for August, some of them. So August looks like a much better month. It looks like we made about 600K in terms of just part of the managed fund, the $50,000 the $50 million fund. So it's actually generating a better return. But these are results to 30 June, so they are
But,
actual.
you know, the port is sitting at 370 today, and we bought it effectively at 260. So, you know, is there anything else going like that? I mean, there are other things going like that, but that's huge.
The Wellington property has
gone like
capital
that, but-
growth, so that's the 11.5 million.
And
I know
fund
that's-
managers don't just hold, so they do sell and take gains where they think it's a good time to do so, and then reinvest within the portfolio continuously. So they're actively trying to grow the capital base.
So that's exactly
Just
what
going-
all that growth's always at risk. That unrealised gains, because they reinvest it. You know, so
That's always
yes,
risk.
we own it. So they're deliberate decisions, but even that's revalued and is reported, like you said. And properties in Wellington are put in the same investment portfolio, but they'll go up and down and all around. But we're very passive about them, and that goes back to our treasury policy.
Yeah, I think Rex makes a great point. The sooner we get our head around that treasury policy and have our meeting on it, the better. And then we'll know precisely, Rex, what it is and what we want to do with it, because we're just flying blind at the moment.
What's the question?
I'll just grab one from Craig, and then so was that a question, not one from me?
You want extra time, I'm still here.
Oh, extension of time.
Just looking at the forestry assets, stay around 11 million, the valuation of those. And yet the point 18.2, the carbon credits have been revalued up 1.2 million. And intangible assets at the bottom of the balance sheet there have gone up by about 2.5, 3, I think. So the carbon credits in the intangible assets, is that where they are? And B, is it a simple fact of the carbon credits we believed we had times a new price is that revaluation, or have we suddenly realised a whole lot more carbon credit?
There's been a slight gain in the number of carbon credits we had, but most of the movement has been because the price of the carbon credits has gone up, and they are included in the intangible assets.
And that's and they do appear under intangible assets. Is that where they are? And what price did you put them at, roughly?
And once again, it's a specific
26
number that I'd need to go back and actually.
No, that's
Can you
probably.
phone a friend?
But
Fortunately, there's no one else out there to ring, I think, who will know the answer.
But here again is an example of an asset of which we're using, because it's been revalued, to help do stuff next year, because our numbers look even better for it. But again, we'll develop a view on that under the Treasury policy, because it's great. We don't have those if we don't have the forests, and So it's well done for us holding on to those and getting the 1.2 million increase in valuation.
Anything else from folk, and I'll get Craig to move the report. Anything else from anyone else?
Just a
Councillor
question. Carry forwards are a pretty simple process actually. Things are generally underdone one year. You want to carry it forward the next budget year. And you've assured us that you've been through all of these line by line. You checked that you're taking forward no more than you think is reasonable. You're holding back as much as you can to make sure a balance sheet for this year is good. And you've gone through that with the executive team and you're happy as it. So I just have to ask myself, is there anything you think the councillors here today could do to change that balance? If not, I think we should just accept it and book it as it is and move forward.
Can I just make a couple of comments? So look, on the capital side, I think this is absolutely as you described. We've got programs of work which straddle years, and it's largely targeted rate, so drops into reserve, and so nothing to see there really particularly. On the operational expenditure side of things, I think it's fair to say that, if you don't mind me saying so, Bronda, if you had your way, you'd probably be carrying as little as possible, in fact probably very, very little forward, on the basis that it would diminish our deficit for the year end in 1920, or at least minimise it, and we would then pick up these issues in the current financial year by potential budget overruns that are then dealt with through borrowing. And I guess the challenge that poses for our teams is working outside of an allocated budget, and the most spectacular example of that is in strategy and planning. So you'll see that we've suggested 459,000 plus 85,000. So if you look at the 459,000, principally that's around the fact that the timing of running the tank plan change, the water conservation order battle that's been going on, and the outstanding fresh water body plan change, it was impossible at the time that we wrote the long-term plan to know when we would finally get those plans drafted, finally approved by the RPC for notification, and then through to hearings. So what we've done is each year we assume a roughly equitable budget for managing those things, but it's very lumpy. And so what I think is more practical for the management team in that area to work with is an allocation, and they've got a big lump of work to do, and they couldn't spend it all last year, and really what they're saying is that they're going to need it now, this year, because we've got notified plan changes, a whole bunch of budgeted costs now that they have to meet. So the preference would be, rather than just running budget overruns and then coming to the end of year effectively for forgiveness on running a bigger deficit than intended, we carry this forward so they've got a working budget to work with. But it's inherently challenging because of the lumpiness of the spend.
I get that.
We'll move to the recommendation. And Craig, you're moving?
I so move.
No.
Second, Jerry, you want to speak, Craig?
No,
Yeah, Jerry. Just a brief comment. Firstly, on the carry forwards, I did some carry forward on Friday with my board, got my ears thoroughly boxed, and if Bronda's on the road to saying, let's minimise these, I think we should adopt a use it or lose it policy on it, and reduce that right down. Having said that, my other comment is that we've been very fortunate to have some extremely good hires in accounting. I've noted a very significant upstep in the quality of reporting we've got. Well done, you guys. You're doing a wonderful job. The accounts are so much clearer than they have been in the past, and you seem to be all over it. So well done.
Thank you.
So we've had that move seconded. All those in favour of receiving that report will say aye. Aye. Those again will say no. That's carried. Now we've got 2 items to go. We're going back to the organisation performance report, and then the minor items. Craig, can I ask you to take the chair? I need to depart for other basis.
Oh, so you pass a resolution
Yeah,
holding
well,
a
it's-
paper longer than you leave your
Well,
cell.
that was 6 hours, it's all up.
Yeah, what about that?
I can't believe the union man voted for it.
I didn't.
No, he didn't.
I didn't. I just want to say, what is this?
Come on, brothers. Is it going to improve or?
You'll be able to compare now, so.
Goodness gracious, I've never seen anything like it.
So, Chair, look, if I introduce the organisation performance report just briefly, there's obviously a lot of material in here. At, I guess, the headline level, and at the risk of stating the obvious, what's quite clear is the disruption of COVID-19 on the organisation's performance and work programs during that 1 April to 30 June period. What I think the report also shows overall is that we have continued to deliver the overwhelming majority of the services to the standard required. We have some areas where there's been some disruption, some slippage, but there are efforts underway to catch up on that and rebalance that. And then I guess I'd say on the financial side of things, two things going on. One is the impact of COVID on activity means that people are putting a lot of time in different areas to where they might normally, and that flows through into the financial allocations for particular work streams, which makes some issues in the budgets a bit variable. We've got some overs and unders across the board, but look, the other thing I would say is just at this stage of the cycle, the last quarter of the financial year, in the second year of a long-term plan, we're starting to see the cumulative effect of some of the assumptions that we made in the long-term plan around budgets starting to get a bit strained, and that's both on the revenue side and on the expenditure side, which are all issues that we've flagged in various different places with you previously and are coming through the long-term plan for fixing up, really. So that's probably just the broad characterisation. I'm really happy to take any questions in relation to the report.
Okay, thanks very much. I think there may be some interest, although we've had a couple of, I don't know, we've got a quorum?
Departures.
Got quorum,
Yeah,
just.
yeah, okay. We've just
How do
got
you
a
get the chair, people leave? Story.
I told them both I wanted in the car park. There's a clue. Could you just, though, CEO, just expand on what you said, just give us a couple of examples of some of those assumptions being tested from the long-term plan that are now coming to pass. Dollar amounts, I presume, is what you're going to be talking about, which will feed off our previous discussion, just so we can kind of start to crystallise the discussion, and then I'll look around to see for interest for further inquiry.
Sure. So look, I think probably one of the most significant are the assumptions we made around revenue in the compliance area, which we had a session on with council. It was last week. We had a couple of workshop items on. So that's a case of us having assumed a level of cost recovery that just hasn't been achievable. So that's a significant one on that side. You got an example earlier on relation to the Heat Smart program, where expenditure is running ahead of budget, and I think also in that area what's been revealed is that we haven't necessarily been recovering the full level of overhead associated with that as we should, and those are just one of the issues where we had perhaps some legacy issues that were inherited in the last long-term plan, weren't picked up, and they continue to be exacerbated as we increase the level of activity in that area, and they fall into a cluster of issues that we're going to have to address as part of this upcoming long-term plan that we're bringing to you on the 23rd of September.
Right, so this new long-term plan is going to be quite a bit different to the previous one by all indications. Councillor Williams, you had some comments.
So, I guess to cut to the chase, there's quite a few red dots in the financials.
Yeah.
But if you added all of them, overspend and underspend together, is the punchline the 0.8 million net funding? That's what they all amount to.
That's correct.
Okay.
And look, you know, one of the things I think we could do differently with this report is where we've got a red dot for financial that we indicate whether it's positive or negative because at the moment it's just a variance from budget, whether it's up or down. I don't think that's necessarily all that helpful. It's really there to be a bit of a red flag to then go looking for what is the variance, how material is it, what's the nature of it.
Okay, my second question, I'll probably just about leave it there. I did a few others, but I just didn't understand page 41. There's an entire table input there that I've read now 6 times, and I just wouldn't mind knowing what it actually says. Could we put that as a follow-up for next time Ian's here or something like that?
You're talking about the afforestation?
Yeah, booster funding, ECS, something called CRM data, carry forward MPI funding, underspends, surplus to projects. It's just like, there's a whole bunch of it seemed to be non-sequiturs there.
Yeah, so look, the erosion control scheme was able to be leveraged by 1 billion trees, or it's actually called the Hill Country Erosion Fund of central government, and that was money that wasn't known at the time the long-term plan was set. So the new government came in, created a new program, we leveraged a whole bunch of new money, created new staff, and then that has, I guess, added to the rollout challenge around the program. But financially, I think this one's reasonably on track.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Councillor Barker?
I'm happy to move the report.
No other questions, commentary on the report? You're seconding. Thank you very much. Any commentary?
I'd just make a few brief comments. When I read this the other night, it was eye-wateringly long. I went through it and I wrote notes all over it. But when I got to the end of it and thought about all the different things, I then thought, let's put it in the context. We've had a very challenging year with Plan Change 6, a very challenging year with the tank, a really challenging year with COVID-19, a whole list of things. And I thought to myself at the end, if this is all that we have sort of undershot on, then it actually has been a fantastic year. I think we've done, the team have done a really remarkable job in the context of those other big challenges we've had. So I think it's, I'm quite happy to accept we haven't quite got the mark on several of them, but hey, hard to be perfect.
I think everyone will join us now because we're going to Councillor Van Beek. You seconded it. Do you want to have anything to say just before we vote? You want another go?
I just wanted to pass on that comment as well. I mean, just the consenting team, for example, 1 consent behind time, all of that monitoring still done in the ICM, despite all of that disruption, and to end up 0.8 million, you know, it's pretty spectacular, James, so well done and pass it on.
Thank you, we will pass it on.
So you go, lock and load that praise. There we go. That's why you kept us to the end of the meeting, is it? 6.5 hours in. Anyway, no, thank you very much. So I'll put that to vote. All in favour of the motion? Aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. It's been an upgrade.
Do this job again.
We have one final item. We had, I think, from memory, one minor item. Peter, you wanted to...
Yeah, just in relation to Te Mana o Te Wai, and obviously how that's going to be framed up in the structure. Obviously, when I attended a meeting last week with Regional Council in regards to the Moaka plan change, and obviously templating that Moaka plan change, there's a lot of other plan changes coming up in that water space, and then obviously with Te Mana o Te Wai coming or being released and going to be implemented, I suppose it's around the framework that's going to assist in the council to implement that plan. And
yeah, so look, the National Policy Statement's provision on Te Mana o Te Wai is premised on us engaging with tangata whenua within the region on understanding what that means. So the first answer I would give you is that we're not assuming that we can determine and define what Te Mana o Te Wai means for the Regional Council unilaterally. That's something we'll do iteratively and in engagement and in partnership, and I think crucially with the Regional Planning Committee. The second point I would just say is that at the national level there is a implementation program in relation to the NPS and the national regulations, and that is a partnership between the Kahui Waimāori group, who have been involved in the development of the policy alongside the regional council sector and central government, as well as the primary sector and the environmental NGOs. And there's a governance group overseeing all of that, which I sit on. Had a meeting this morning at 9 o'clock and I couldn't be there because of this meeting, so I sent them specifically a request that we prioritise the national guidance around Te Mana o Te Wai and work with Kahuiwai Māori on that. So we're going to get guidance coming from Wellington, but that's no substitute for the guidance, for the engagement we need to do with mana whenua as well. So we'll get it from both ends, and that'll help us work through what this means for us over the coming months.
Okay. And so I suppose because those conversations having with the Mohaka plan change and that document's coming, obviously that'll form part of those discussions, thinking forward, as in it's better if that's coming into, put that into the plan.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, all right, Peter, so thank you very much, and there's further inquiry there, take something offline, because that is more to inform all of us about something that is of interest to members of the committee. So I think that completes our agenda. Thank you so much, and on behalf of the previous chair, thank you so much for everyone's effort, and of course we are going to close properly. I'm just doing my little bit, but I humbly invite someone to wrap this up after 6 hours 45 minutes of solid investment in time and resource. Thank you, everybody.
I would note the previous chair is like the captain of a Greek cruise liner. First into the lifeboat and gone. How were the passengers?
I was going to say he's on the rocks, but anyway.
Chair, might I suggest that we do the orange number 2, whakataka te hau? Practice makes perfect.
Sure.
Whakataka te hau
Ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tōna, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te ātakura, he tio, he huka, he hau, ti hei maureora. Cease the winds from the west, cease the winds from the south. Let the breeze blow over the land, let the breeze blow over the ocean. Let the red-tipped dawn come with a sharpened ear, a touch of frost, a promise of a glorious day.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everybody. Meeting concluded.